Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Mad Capper, and this is another video on Raid Shadow Legends. Today I want to embark on a possible new series, so before I get into it, let me let you know, I need your opinions. Is this something you'd be interested in seeing on a weekly basis or not? Let me know with your comments and with your thumbs up and sharing, liking, subscribing, getting this out there. I really enjoy kind of a deep dive into the game as a whole and opinions and topics within the game, not necessarily dealing with mechanics of the game, but more topics about the game. Also not looking to bitch or moan or complain about the game, but kind of take an in-depth view at a particular piece of the game or theme or what have you. So let me know in the comments down below, not only is this something you'd watch more often, is this something you would like to see on a weekly basis? Also let me know what topics you want me to cover if you do wish to see more of this. And the best way, of course, is to like the video and share it amongst those of you that, your friends, your clanmates, other people that play the game. If this gets out there, this is something I'm willing to do. It does take a little bit extra time, but I'm certainly more willing or amply willing to do this. So the first topic I want to talk about today is meta. What is meta? What is meta within Raid Shadow Legends? And does meta even exist, or is it even relevant to you? Let's go through all those topics today and talk about meta. Before we get into what meta is for Raid Shadow Legends, we have to understand what meta is, period. Now, meta itself means after or beyond. It is derived from the Greek language, the word meta, and it has nothing to do with what it is in Raid Shadow Legends, although maybe existentially it might be. The reality is it is an acronym, and the acronym is, believe it or not, most effective tactics available. Meta has been referred to in multiple meanings throughout history. As we discussed, it was from the Greek word meta. However, in the gaming world, meta was first popularized by Nigel Howard, who was an English scholar who referred to strategy war games and how players would use in these simulations the most powerful, simple tactics in order to gain advantage the most quickly. In other words, to win. So it was the tactics that enabled them to win. I definitely remember it first popularized in gaming, card gaming. So the Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and all those sort of games, while I personally didn't play them, I do absolutely remember that the meta was described as the kind of the decks that were the most popular at the time. As new boosters and new card series were introduced, the meta would change and shift to new card combinations that were generally favored to be the most powerful in order to win. When you take that to online gaming, it can be everything from a tier list in, for example, Street Fighter, that allows you to see what the most quote-unquote powerful champions are, and then using those champions to win. And of course, even from Counter-Strike, where you use the most popular methods of bomb defusal or defense in order to have the best chance to win at a particular map. However, I think the most popularized version of this has to have been around the MOBA genre, League of Legends being the most popular, Dota 2 being the one I played. And so the term meta, of course, is commonly used to determine or to describe the most advantageous champions, artifacts, strategies in order to garner the best, most favorable outcome. And from that perspective, for those of you who do know MOBAs like League of Legends and Dota, it did refer to the specific champions and artifacts that the pro level players used in order to win more effectively. And from that perspective, that is a key point to note, is that a lot of the times the meta is formed around pro or high level, high skill play. In Dota, which I am very familiar with, you have an MMR, which is your multiplayer ranking from 0 to, I think the highest that I've ever seen is around 10,000. Usually 8,000 to 9,000 is where the top players sit in the game. And the players at the top is where the meta is defined. Certain champions after each patch are deemed better or worse, either based on their abilities and changes to their abilities, or perhaps changes to items that make them more or less useful in the current strategy of the game. Sometimes it's changes in the map itself, which lends better or worse to certain champions and or artifacts and combination thereof. So the meta is a well-defined, constructed thing within these MOBAs. What I find interesting, which I'm going to draw a parallel to from Dota to the Raid Shadow Legends meta, or perceived meta. We haven't decided whether or not it is a real thing within Raid Shadow Legends, but one of the things I noticed is that the pro scene, the top skill players, there is a sharp curve in the relevance of meta. As such, the lower skill you are. At high skill level, so pro and those top tier, the 7,000 to 9,000 MMR players that are playing these high level skill games, whether it's pubs or competitively, meta is everything. You must ban out the champions that are too hard to counter. Then you must pick the best champions in consort with the best supports and cores and mid laner and all that stuff. And then you have to try to counter the other team who's doing the same. And so if you try to go off meta, typically it's going to make you pay. There is a reason why certain champions each patch are absolutely banned out every time in the pro scene. And even though high skill games that are pubs, you can watch them on, of course, Twitch and in-game client for Dota. I'm not a big League of Legends follower or player, so I'm sure it's exactly the same. What happens is when you drop down to the kind of category 2, which is the 5,000 to 7,000 MMR, kind of mid to high skill players, is the meta becomes a little more obscured. People still talk about the meta like it's important, but a lot of the times, a lot of the timings and a lot of the events and a lot of the gameplay is reduced. For example, there's certain champions, like if you play Dota, Leshrac right now is very high into meta. If you hit timings, and timings are the certain items you need to make this champion powerful and the time at which you get them. So by 8 minutes you need item A, by 12 minutes you need item B. Well, this requires a whole team to work around that ability, stacking camps, getting extra farm, not taking farm yourself, harassing the enemy team. There's a whole side piece of the game just around making sure that your core players get that level. That doesn't happen in mid and lower MMR. So what happens is the meta, which starts here, really kind of dips off to a curve. And then once you get to that 2,000 to 4,000, and especially the 2,000 sub, the really, where I live, the awful player, it drops on a sharp curve. Champions that are absolutely out of meta at high level because they just don't add enough value to the team play and winning are popular mainstays and high winning percentage champions. I think Slark for the longest time has been out of meta at the high level and completely playable in the low level because they are two different gameplays or two different styles and they make completely different ones. Pudge is another example. Everyone loves to play the guy. He throws a hook. It's fun. He's not really in meta at high level, but at mid-low level, the lower you go, the more often he plays, and he wins at a pretty high percentage. So now that we have talking about that, what is the meta to them? The meta is simply the generally accepted best case scenario, best teams, best combination of players, best skill sets, best artifacts in order to make the best chance at success. So how does that relate to Raid Shadow Legends? Well, the first thing to, of course, acknowledge is that 90% of your gameplay in Raid Shadow Legends is PvE. And I think by its very nature, the static structure of PvE means that meta can't really exist. You don't really have you have a set team, you have a set abilities, you have a best practices. You go into a dungeon and you go into Spider Den, for example, you go into stage 20 or even stage 25. I've been running a lot of stage 20. Everyone remembers this. You don't really call this meta, though this is one of the faster ways to complete the team. I have a Septimus, I have a Bad Alcazar, I have a Ghostborn and a couple of Royal Guards. It's an 11-second kill. It's fairly simple, right? At higher levels, HP burn. Now, you can say, well, yeah, but HP burn itself is quote-unquote meta. But there are so many champions and so different ways you can take a single target and spread the debuff. Or you can take any sort of the AoE debuff. I can use Venus, though she's not as effective as using, for example, Tyrant or Sikia, who is, I mean, if you want to call a meta champion, but it's not the same thing because there's a static, on the other end it's static. On the other end, there is a very specific set defense, opponent, right? Your opponent never changes in PvE, and in order to have, I think, something that's a meta, there has to be an implied change or dynamicness based on patches, based on champions, based on creative players, all these sort of things. Whereas in PvE content, once you've mastered it, there are X number of ways to do it. By the way, you can still kill level 25 using enemy max HP champions, for example. It just takes longer. It's you know, you can still use shield set, you can still use weak affinity tank. It just requires you to take longer, have a little patience, but you can do it. And by its very nature, something to be meta is the generally accepted way to have success. But if you can have success in multiple different ways, I feel it doesn't really constitute meta. The other thing is you are not going up against another player who has their own strategies and techniques. So I think generally speaking, we can agree that while meta could be used for PvE, it's really not. It's a little less relevant, and therefore I don't think it really applies. When we talk about meta, ultimately, all the glowing, there's so many glowing dots, I hate them. You're talking about the arena. And from within the arena, we're talking about meta in a very specific way. Now, my first thing I want to tell you, does meta exist in PvP Raid Shadow Legends? Yes. Yes, it definitely does. However, is it relevant? That's a little harder to discuss. Let's dive into that just a little bit. When we take a look at the top players, now obviously you're seeing players that, you know, there's a couple that might be around here, but these aren't the top end players, but these are players that generally can probably compete in Platinum up till Sunday. And when you look at who's up here and you look at the teams, you see very strong commonalities, right? You see, look at every single one of them has Siphi, the top 5. You see Duchess in a lot of them. You see Tormund, you see Warlord, Ursuga. You see, from the nuking perspective, Morty Macabre's kind of playing back into the meta. You see Kandrafon, who I think is falling out of meta a little bit, but still is around there. Foley on reset day tends to be a meta favorite because, you know, there's such a scare around his block revive. For example, Necrit, definitely a meta champion. Hegemon, especially a control Hegemon. You have these champions that are meta. So there is a meta that's alive and well, but is that important to you? Well, the reality is, and I would argue the answer is no. Meta is completely irrelevant to the 99% of the player base that plays in this game. And the reason is, meta only defines, like we said in, for example, Dota, the pro or high MMR, high skill play. In this game, skill is less of a factor. Now, I'm not going to belittle these players. There is a level of skill, there's a level of build, there's a sequence of how you decide to go about things, especially on offense. And I do think that there is some level of skill within this game, but it is a much smaller skill gap and more of a pay gap. For example, if you have a $40,000 account, you have every opportunity and should be able to finish in the top level arena, the top 300, the platinum level. Whereas if you have all the skill, you are a mastermind savant in this game, but you are a free-to-play player, chances are, even with the best luck on pulling champions, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, at least very difficult to compete at the top 300, certainly the top 100 level. So from that perspective, there is a money piece involved, but the meta still exists for a small portion of people. Most of you who quote meta, actually it doesn't matter. I will show you my team. And the team that I use for 99, I have them on, I have it on, my team's on defense. It's on offense. It's the same team I use. It is arguably somewhat meta. Kymar is a very strong champion right now. Lysandra is, in my opinion, a very underrated champion, especially seeing resistance has come out of the quote-unquote meta. Madame Saris is a mainstay on offense and even in defense for a lot of teams. And Ethos is the best, one of the best at least. It seems to be every 5 minutes someone else is quote unquote better than Ethos, but I still love him as my fourth. Now, the thing is, I'm getting wins, right? I'm getting wins. Hey, Bertram had to take 2 chances. Look at the team. That team should beat me, but I still was able to win the first time. Sarmila, like that isn't that not a meta team? Lost high, even high power. There's some high resist here. Still didn't manage. And if you go on attack, I don't lose with this team. I've only got 10, sorry. But typically, I don't know if it's near the beginning of the week, so it's harder to tell. But I don't think I have a single loss yet. Yeah, I'm 30-0. I'll lose some, mainly due to RNG, but I can play 6 days a week with that exact same team on offense and defense and still run a ton of wins. And maybe I'll have single digit, maybe 10 losses. The final day, I might get another 10 losses in a week, but 90% of the time, without changing my defense or offense, I can get these. Now, I do counter champions, but that's not the same as meta. Countering champions is simply using attributes to counteract the attributes you have to deal with. Torment, I have to bring in immunity, right? With Duchess, I want to bring in a block revive. These sort of things that allow me, Hegemon, I have to bring in immunity, possibly a Molly if I'm worried about being speed cut. These are the sort of things. And at the end of the day, I think too many of us rely or talk about meta like it is relevant. At the end of the day, for 90% of what you do in the arena, for 99% of you watching this video, meta is irrelevant. You do not need meta in order to win. You need speed. And I hear the speed meta is dead, and that is 100% true for these players. And if you're one of those that are playing against these players, or you want to push into this spectrum, of which I would argue there's approximately 1,000 active and probably 2,000 possible accounts right now. Maybe there's more, but a lot of them don't care, don't try, just don't understand the game well enough in spite of the fact that they spent a lot of money on this game, or have done it and now have moved on. There's a lot of those out there that they are no longer part of this, and therefore meta doesn't really exist for them either. The only time you need to is if you're pushing for platinum and if you feel you have a legitimate chance of getting there. For those of you in gold 4 or lower, trust me, speed is still king. Now, there are certain elements that have affected the meta that will kind of delve into the lower ranks. First of all, Swift Parry gear. Once the Forge came out, it became more available. While I will say end game level Swift Parry gear is still very difficult to achieve through strictly the Forge, I will also say that it, as time goes on, becomes more and more prevalent among all areas of the game. Reaction gear is the other thing. Now, reaction gear is actually even more widespread, because you could be in the smallest guild at rank 1, like my free-to-play account actually has better reaction gear than my main account. Has lots of reaction gear, but it's all triple rolled flat stack garbage that I have to use if I want to use reaction gear, but I lose so much in stats that it's very difficult for me to want to do that. So I only have certain champions that I put them on that I use if I'm gonna plan to be competitive on Sunday. Other than that, my free-to-play account actually has better reaction gear. I can just use it all the time. I don't have to swap it in and out, which means you can get it no matter how high or low you are, because reaction gear is given away in all tiers. Now, maybe it's not 6-star legendary, but it's still reaction gear, and the process of negating a crit is the same regardless of where you are. So those things do creep down, and of course, because of that, you do have to keep a little bit of a reminder. But I would still argue that if I were to battle this whole group, I would do certain things like, hey, I wouldn't change anything for these teams. I might bring in someone for this, although my team's pretty good at countering. The only ones I would really have to worry about looking down, the Hegemon teams, I'd have to switch up, just because I need to ensure that I'm dealing with the fact that they're locking people out. If there are any Torments, which this page doesn't have, I might do that, but I have those all set up. If I go into a battle, I have the different counters and the different combinations I want to do here, including, do I want to bring in someone to block revive? Do I need Krisk for the shields? Do I need attack up? Is that more important to me on a tuned team? Or do I want this, which is the usual team I use, which has my slower ethos, but then I'm pretty confident my Kymar is going to sleep people, therefore it doesn't worry. I can bring in if I think I'm slower than but need immunity. Like, I have these options available to me, but at the end of the day, it's not meta that's driving this. It's simply attributes of the opponent, which I believe is a different scenario than just simply playing the meta, playing a Warlord, Necrit, Siphi, Duchess, these sort of players. So meta does exist. It is within this game. but it is such a small portion of the people that my final thing would be, hey, if you're watching this and you're part of the rest of us that don't push for platinum and don't have those high-end, high-level accounts, do not be concerned with meta. Meta is very much irrelevant to you. It is something you should know exists, but probably never have to deal with. Just make your champions faster than the opponents and hit harder than the opponents, and you will have nothing to worry about, whether that is with Trunda and Arbiter, whether you have Lysandra and Kymar, whether you have Ethos, Trunda, Candrafon, or Foley, or even the new Magnar. That's all I have under meta. What did you think? Is this something that you want me to do weekly? Let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what topics you'd like me to cover. I am open to anything. It's just a different way to talk about this game and to make a video about this game without just going through the things that you guys get from all of us every single time. So I hope you enjoyed it. I am Mad Capper. I want to thank you. Please be kind, be safe, and we'll see you in the next video.